You're listening to the ReThreading Madness podcast, which airs live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We are recorded and produced on the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. I'm your host, Bernadine Fox, and this is the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. Welcome to our show.
I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through. Just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright.
You're listening to ReThreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox.
And I'm co-host Don Wright.
And today we're going to talk about Christmas because Christmas is one of those things that is loaded. I think it's probably loaded for everybody on some level. I think for those of us who've experienced trauma or have other mental health issues, it's that much more loaded and problematic. So we're dedicating this entire program to the issue of Christmas, and not just Christmas, but also New Year's, what to do about New Year's as well. So on the line today, we have Jake, and some of you may remember Jake from a program that we did not too long ago on the issue of depression. Hi, Jake.
Hello.
How are you today?
Doing very well. How are you doing?
Wonderful, actually. It's an okay day. So, we talked before about, it wasn't necessarily about depression, it was actually about suicide and how depression isn't necessarily always the motivating force behind somebody who is suicidal. And so we just want to build on that a bit, because one of the things I also know about you is that you really hate Christmas.
I don't know, hate's a very strong word. I might agree with that on a particular day, but today it's not something that I would probably choose to describe my feelings around Christmas. I just feel it's just a bundle of pressure and kind of a period of the year that I like to get behind or get past.
Or just ignore.
So I would describe December 26th as my favorite day on the calendar.
Did you like Christmas as a child? What memories do you have of Christmas as a child?
Well, that's part of it. For me, my mother and father were great around Christmas, and they would spoil their 4 kids, myself included, and there'd be mounds and mounds of presents waiting on Christmas morning, and a big stocking stuffed with everything you can imagine. And part of that is, I don't know, I think they went into debt to deliver on that. Christmas was very commercial back in the early 60s, mid-60s. I think it was the kind of thing that was expected, and my mother and father would go into debt, I'm sure, to deliver on the big Christmas promise. And when I became a parent years later, I just, for a variety of reasons, one of which was financial, but I just found it just really difficult to replicate or duplicate.
Mm-hmm. And so, what do you do for Christmas? How do you handle Christmas?
Well, I have a couple of daughters, twin daughters. They're in their late 20s now. But when they were really small, I split with their mom, and we went through some pretty challenging times around Christmas, and I kind of got used to not seeing them around Christmas, and it, of course, felt bad, and I have tied those feelings, those emotions around that time of year, along with what I described earlier, the commercial part of it. And so we found a way around that in our little family, and found a way to deal with it that's kind of unique.
So can I just stop you there just for a moment? I just want to just clarify something. So you used to enjoy Christmas and like Christmas, and your childhood had lovely Christmas moments in it. But what happened around you and your ex-wife around not being able to see your kids on Christmas Day, or Christmas time, that's what caused you to develop a bad feeling around Christmas, or feeling lonely, or is that kind of what I'm getting? Is that's when that started?
Right. It was a combination of factors, but earlier in life, and not being able to replicate or duplicate what my parents were able to deliver for their kids, and then my experience as a parent being somewhat loaded with other factors, which led to it kind of being a dark time of the year for me. And so, I think there's also other things too about out in public and how human beings tend to treat each other in the Christmas season, which is supposed to be one way. Good cheer, goodwill towards men, etc., etc. And it seems to be a lot about shopping and a lot about everybody having some sort of agenda they're trying to live up to. And there just seems to be a lot of, negative vibe around it that is off-putting for me.
So do you try and, excuse me, do you try and deliver good cheer, or are you somebody who just kind of tucks their head down and just tries to get through the year?
Yeah, it's a time on Christmas Day. I mean, everybody's traditionally with their families, right? So there's nobody around anyway.
Right.
So I get together with my family, my daughters, and we do something called Un-Christmas, which is basically non-traditional, and just getting together and communing as a family, and having some food and just discussion and low-key get-together.
And have you developed traditions around that on Christmas, or how
we try. I mean, it's nothing that's ever going to compete with the grand tradition of Christmas and how things normally go. But we all decided that we should do something as a family, so we just order takeout and figure out where we're going to have it happen, and just schedule a few hours of just time to spend together as a family.
So it becomes a day of being with family, especially your
kids. Yeah, it's kind of what we think that the day should be all about anyway, which is enjoying each other and just taking some time and relax with each other. I think that's the thing that I appreciated most about Christmas, or that I carried forward from childhood, was the time of year where you get to just relax with your family, and extended family in some cases. So I'll tell you one thing I did with my daughters one year. I was living away from them in Houston, Texas. They were here in Vancouver, and I came to visit in November. And before I left, I gave them each $100. And I said, now what I want you to do with this $100 is I want you to think about how you would spend it in a charitable way, which means make it into something good for somebody else. And your present to me this year is going to be the story of what you decided to do with that $100. And I gave them another present, but that was their present for me, was the story behind what they chose to do with the money in terms of how they perceived charity should be.
Right, and what did they choose to do?
One of them we took marched into a hospice downtown, where a family friend had spent some time, and went in and said, "Listen, I'd like to make a cash donation, and I don't know how to go about doing that." So she was, I don't know how old she was. I think maybe 8 or 9 at the time. So it was a challenging thing for a child of that age to do, and she waltzed in and made her announcement and told me the story about how that made her feel, which was very cool. And my other daughter had a friend in class who was underprivileged and wasn't going to have a joyous Christmas in the traditional sense that most kids experience. And so she took $100 and took her friend shopping and bought her new clothes and made her feel good. So I really thought that was cool.
Yeah. Do you find that they retain the lessons of that experience?
I don't know. I'd like to think so, but
Right.
I'm not sure. I know they remember that Christmas, and I know they remember that event in their life, so it made an impact on them that they carried forward with them. And I think, a lot of things get triggered for you when you have your own family, when you have children of your own, and you remember things that happened to you, and maybe sometimes you replicate those things as best you can with your own children.
So
I have high hopes about it, but I may be kidding myself.
I don't think the lessons are ever lost with kids, especially those kinds of lessons. That's what I choose to believe. So, and what about all the other stuff that goes along with Christmas, like all the Christmas songs? And actually, I was going to swear in front of the Christmas songs, but and the trees and the stuff in the stores that comes out right after Halloween.
Well,
How does that
have
impact
a list,
on
and
you?
I always did as a child of favorite Christmas songs. I actually have them on a playlist on my phone right now, and I will probably run through it a couple of times in December, but then I get tired of it quickly. But my favorite Christmas song, which will probably seem strange to you, is actually not a Christmas song. It's Queen and David Bowie, Under Pressure. And it's actually a song about love, but also how life puts people under pressure. And I find that really authentic and fitting for this time of year,
Right.
for our collective society, and how I feel about this time of year.
So what are you doing this year for Christmas?
I don't know. I'm kind of waiting to hear how things are going on the daughter front and what their schedules are like. When you have 20-something kids, I don't know. I think they're still in that period of life where they spend a lot of time thinking about what's in it for them. So I wait and see. I scheduled a couple of things, like an event last weekend with going to the gem show at the PNE was one, and something like indoor go-karting, just to do a fun seasonal type event that doesn't have any loaded meanings behind it, just spending time together and doing something we don't normally do.
Well, that's good.
Right.
I hope that happens for you. I think also you work and you take
Right.
advantage of the
Yeah,
double,
I get paid
triple
copious
pay.
amounts of money to work
Yeah.
on holidays. It's almost too much, triple what I normally get paid, so it's too much to turn down. I mean, in my house, my budget won't allow me to walk away from that kind of money.
Right. I don't think maybe there are some people, but I don't know them whose budget would allow them to do that. So thank you, Jake, for chatting with us about this. It's,
You're welcome anytime. Love chatting with you guys.
We appreciate it. And I do hope you have a good Christmas
Well,
this
thank you
year.
very much.
And
looking forward to it. And also the 26th being my number one day of the year. It's something I'm rubbing my hands together over.
well, I hope you dance in your living room that day then.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jake.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Blessings. Bye-bye.
And we're back talking about Christmas and hoping that we can give people some idea of how difficult Christmas is for people who've been traumatized or have mental health issues and don't have a lot of family around them. And maybe offer some solutions and some ideas about how to cope. So, Dawn, I know that you've done a lot of work in the past and maybe now, I don't know, are you still working with folks?
Yes.
Okay.
So I work with survivors of sexual abuse, and the majority of them were abused within the context of the family. So Christmas was often very challenging. Aside from all the societal pressures around Christmas, in many families, that's where the drug and alcohol abuse ramps up, and then
Right.
subsequently the trauma increases. And the stress and anxiety of worrying about, is it going to happen now? Is it going to happen an hour from now or tomorrow? Christmas is a very frightening, overwhelming time for a lot of my clients.
Right.
And so as adults, facing Christmas brings up all those dark memories, and it's not a good time of year for a lot of the clients I used to work with.
Yes, and going back to see family and maybe staying in their home if they're coming from far away can trigger folks in terms of memories, especially if they're going back into their family home and having to spend time with people who have abused them because they haven't been able to disclose, or they did disclose and they didn't get believed, and everything has kind of remained the same. So it's a very triggering, difficult time for folks. I think the other thing that's really hard and was true when I was working as a support worker with survivors is the whole Christmas thing. I mean, Christmas songs used to start at the beginning of November. I think radio stations figured out they needed to stop doing that. But certainly Christmas decorations and Christmas gifts and everything start on November 1st in the stores. And so people are bombarded for an entire month or more, often with Christmas and the ideas of Christmas and the fantasy about Christmas, because that's how stores and people sell gifts and goodies and things. And so they're bombarded with the Hallmark movie about the wonderful Christmas event or story where everything magically turns out okay and everybody's family is wonderful and loving and kind. And for many people who are survivors of trauma, that just doesn't exist in their world.
Right. And they're expected to collude in the fantasy as well, which is very difficult when
Yes.
you know it's very shallow and false.
Yeah, that whole social facade of we are a good family.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so what would you offer to people who are survivors of trauma? They're in the worst case scenario having to go back and celebrate Christmas with somebody who may have been one of their abusers. What kinds of things would you help people work through or decide or put in place for themselves?
Right. Well, I think the first thing is to identify what Christmas was like growing up and how much of that baggage is still being carried around, and help clients work through that and free themselves from the weight of that.
Right.
And then once that feels like it's reduced significantly, then I would talk about how would you like to redefine this time of the year and make it your own somehow. And
Much like Jake just suggested doing.
I think that for a lot of people, getting together with friends and just sharing a meal and just having the company of good and safe friends is a nice alternative to, the whole tradition of gifts and family and all the rest of that.
Right.
So I think it's really
good
important
and safe family too, because not all family, even in an abusive situation, is problematic, right? There may be safe people within that sphere. But what you're saying is to define and identify those people who are safe for you and
Right.
to celebrate Christmas. Now, that said, there are people who don't feel like it's safe or that they're ready to cope with not showing up for Christmas. That in and itself is part of the problem. And so,
Right.
so what would you do in that scenario where somebody is feeling like they have to go even though
Right.
they don't feel safe?
Well, I think that there's a way to hold on to your own personal center within that kind of a context. And that's not easy to do, but there might be some relaxation techniques or some kind of redefining of your experience, you might gain some insight on family dynamics by being more observational at that time. It might be a good learning experience. So I think it's finding your inner strength and being able to hold on to that even under that kind of familial pressure.
Right. One of the things that I used to do with folks is strategize about what to do if somebody who had been an abuser approached them, and so that they could strategize about how to avoid them or how to get away or what kinds of things to say that they felt that they could say, but that would keep them safe and keep them at a distance.
Yes, it reminds me, I had a client who's abused by his brother-in-law and was going to be going home for Christmas with family and knew that he would probably be around. And so we did a lot of talking about how will he deal with that situation if the brother-in-law approaches him, how is he going to react? And it was important for him to sort of think about that and maybe even rehearse it a little bit ahead of time so that he's not thrown off center when
Right.
that actually happens.
Right. And that's part of it, is just the planning to know that, that if you can plan ahead rather than just walking in blindly or walking in believing somehow it's going to magically be different. So those are good things. What about folks who don't have family, who have estranged from their entire family, or and maybe not have been able to develop friends that are close enough that they would be invited to their Christmas? I remember lots of times there were lots of people like that who the whole Christmas thing was just so traumatizing because it really reminded them of how alone they were.
I had a former girlfriend that she would hold an orphan's Christmas, she would call it, and she'd invite people in her life that she knew were going to be alone, without family for some reason or other, however that might be. It could be a family alienation or just the family's too far, spread too far and wide. But so these people got together and shared Christmas and shared camaraderie, and it didn't have to be about presents and gifts and all that kind of stuff. They made it their own.
So like the family who celebrates Christmas that is around celebrating family as opposed to giving, celebrating friends and relationships as opposed to giving. Those are good things. The turkey and the trimmings and all of those things can still trigger difficult memories of a childhood. And so I don't know, do professionals talk to folks about where to go if they're feeling triggered or if trauma has come up? I mean, professionals go on holidays too. What do they put in place so that their folks can remain okay? Do you know?
Well, it becomes very personal. Every client is different in terms of what's going to work for them. I've had a few clients that what worked for them was to volunteer at Christmas for people that are less advantaged, at the soup kitchens or whatever, and that gives them a sense of giving without having to get out their credit card. And there's more value in that because you see the direct result of someone's life being made a little bit better because of the time you spend giving.
So how would somebody go about, we're going to come back to that topic, but just on the idea of volunteering, how would somebody go about finding a place to volunteer?
Well, I mean, all the soup kitchens that run throughout the year and places like Salvation Army and the Catholic Charities, and there are a number of charitable organizations that provide meals anyway, but they try to really lay it on kind of thick during the holidays with bigger meals. And also there are, some of these places will also give out small packages of gifts. It might be warm socks or whatever that get donated. In fact, one of my board members would buy a bunch of socks to be given out to people that couldn't afford anything for themselves. And it's kind of nice to get some warm socks when you've been walking around barefooted for the last while.
Actually, they say that socks in the wintertime is one of the things they need the most in places that are working with folks who are poor or homeless and in need. We'd come back in a bit and talk a little bit more with Dawn and I about what kinds of things you can do around Christmas time to cope and get through the holidays. I'm Bernadine Fox.
And I'm co-host Don Wright.
And we're here with Victoria to chat some more about Christmas on our Christmas theme show and looking at the ways in which Christmas can be problematic and some of the ways that we can work to make it not so problematic. So welcome, Victoria, to our show.
Thank you.
So tell us about your Christmas.
My Christmas this year. I'm from the UK, from London. I've been living in Vancouver for 7 years now. So Christmas is always a little bit of a tricky time. I did tend to spend it at home for most of the first few years I was here. I didn't go back last year for Christmas, and I'm not going to be there this year either.
Right.
Yeah, so I do have that.
So do you have any family here at all, or are you familylessness?
I am
here.
Familyless here.
Familyless.
Yeah, I am just here by myself. Yeah.
Yes. So how do you cope with that? What kinds of things do you
do? Well, I've got some. I'm very lucky. I've got a few really good friends that I've made over the years. The people that I tend to speak to most often about these things, they tend to be other British people, because they're people that they understand my experience in a way that no one else can, just purely because they're from where I'm. But I do have a lot of other friends here, some Canadian friends who are from other parts of Canada, that also have that, not necessarily always near their families at this time. So
right.
I did just, chatting to other people that have the same experience as me and kind of trying to, first of all, just kind of feel know that I'm not alone in that experience, but
right.
also try and make my own traditions. Sometimes, like last Christmas, in London and with my friend group, we always tend to go out on Christmas Eve. It's usually a big night out at the pub and a big party night. So like Christmas Eve with your friends and then Christmas Day with the family.
Right.
And so last year, me and a friend of mine who's from England, we took a few of our Canadian buddies and some Australians and some other people to the pub on Christmas Eve to kind of just try and recreate that. So that was a nice way to sort of create a new tradition here, or just continue a tradition that we enjoy
right.
in a new place. Yeah, just find some little continuity that I could really. But honestly, I don't really know how I cope sometimes.
Right.
Because it can be really hard.
And what part of it is hard? And of course, I could assume that, but I'd rather hear it from you.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's very multi-layered. I think being away from my family is hard. Being away from my friends that I've known for a really long time, people that know me incredibly well, and also being away from the place that I call home,
right.
that I feel is where I'm from. And it's complicated because when I first came to Canada, I felt like I really had a deep connection to London and England and Britain, but there was a lot of things that I felt like I didn't fit in there. Like I didn't feel like I belonged there as well. And then so I think I was kind of trying to figure that out really by coming somewhere else and trying that out.
Right.
But I also feel a lot of that here too. Is that not a huge sense of belonging. It is hard to make friends. It's easy to meet people, I think, and chat to people and have connections, but I think it can be difficult to make really deep connections with
in
people
Vancouver.
that kind of go beyond the surface
right.
of things.
You mean in Vancouver? It's hard
in Vancouver, yeah.
I hear that all the time, all the time by everybody, is that it's very easy to meet people. People in Vancouver can be very friendly, but to have that deep connection is very hard to find.
Yeah.
Yes.
It does feel like that, yeah.
So on Christmas Day, what do you do?
Well, it's varied. Like when I like I said, used to usually go home, but these last 2 years, like last year, I had my friends James and Lauren. They're both from the UK. We spent the Christmas Day together, and I actually made turkey for the first time.
Oh, how did it go?
Fun. It was all right, considering I was incredibly hungover when I made it. It actually went really well.
Good for you.
It was pretty good.
You do realize that you might have to be hungover again to make a good turkey.
Yeah, I think that's going to have to be the trick from now on. And then this year, I'm actually very lucky. A really good friend of mine has invited me to her parents' place, and with her sisters and their partners and stuff. So there's going to be a little group, and I've been invited along to spend the Christmas Day with them. So I'm going to be doing that this year, which is so generous. And honestly, I was really worried about it this year because I might get a bit emotional talking about this.
Okay.
I apologise first.
We're here.
So it's just been a bit of a hard year, and I really miss home now. I'm starting to really think about moving back to the UK, even if it's just for a short time.
Right.
And I was worried what I was going to do on Christmas Day. I didn't really have any plans. I don't have a partner, so I don't have, that one person that we all have, that, most people have, that you just is like the default, you're going to spend holidays with that person, or when you're feeling lonely or a bit alone, then there's always that one person,
Right.
or friends. But obviously with Christmas time, friends go to their families and stuff. So
Yes.
so I'm actually really happy that this friend has invited me to spend that day with them. So because I was really worried about it this year. Everybody seemed to be busy. The few people that I've talked to, and I was starting to worry that I was going to have to spend the day by myself.
And have you spent a Christmas by yourself?
No, I never have.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, I've talked to a friend about doing that, and I mean, I think when it would come down to the day, I'm sure there's always other people that are also by themselves. That I'm sure I would have found someone to spend the day with, but it could be maybe a good thing to do. I don't think that if you are alone and it ends up being something that you can't necessarily do anything about, I was kind of starting to gear myself up to just get ready to embrace it and maybe just have my own. I would probably spend most of the day on Skype to people, friends and family at home, and maybe just watch some silly movies, or just maybe have a day where I just feel like I can do what I want, just read my book for hours, or do something else that I enjoy, play some music.
So if you had been spending the day alone, what do you think that... sometimes just to give you my background, I was a single parent, completely estranged from every member of my family in a new city with 2 small children.
That's hard.
And you're right. I mean, people spend time with their families, and so you are not that person. And so, as being the only adult in my family, it came down to me to create Christmas and everything. And so for my kids, I think it was not as problematic as it was for me, in that, it was extremely lonely and a difficult day, and I had to pretend that I was happy, and Christmas was wonderful. So I just wonder what you might have, felt yourself had you, not gotten this opportunity. What kinds of things were coming up for you?
So I do feel. I do think I experience a lot of loneliness. Anyway, regardless of the day of the year.
Yes.
And I don't think I'm alone in that loneliness. I know that a lot of people. The more I talk about it, the more I sort of have other people will say they feel the same, and especially when I go into the intricacies of my particular experience of loneliness and how I feel about, like, how I experience it. There are other people that I know have the exact same experience that I do.
Yes.
So that's nice. But I'm saying this just to say that, I think that it is. I think when people hear that you're lonely, I think it can feel so shocking to people. I think people really recoil at that word, and I think they find it to be very uncomfortable to hear.
You're right. I hadn't thought of that, but you are right. I believe that's true. What do you think, Don?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Certainly, I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way.
No, and they feel uncomfortable with the idea of being lonely as well.
Yeah.
I think it has some social stigma to the idea of being lonely.
Yeah, that's exactly how I think. I think that is what it is. And so the reason why I want to talk about it is to say, like, I want to normalize it.
Yes.
I want to say that, I am lonely a lot of the time, and sometimes I find it really difficult, and it can be really sad.
It can be really sad. And I mean, part of being lonely is that you don't have that person to reach out to that you need to talk with or laugh with or enjoy something with, and doing
but
things.
Part of me talking about it and saying that is to be able to kind of not keep it so hidden for myself, and be a lot more open about my experience, because I think for me, I will feel better if I do that.
Yes.
And I also want other people to know that it's not, if they feel the same, that they can connect with me on that.
Yeah.
Like, that's something else that we might have in common. Or, and then hopefully people might be a little bit more aware of what others are going through, maybe might be able to reach out more. And it's not like I don't have anyone. I want to be really clear. Like, I know there are a lot of people that are incredibly isolated. Like, I'm very lucky. I do have some really good friends, and I have people that always say to me, "You call me whenever you want."
Mm-hmm.
And we can always talk, and that's really nice to hear that. But sometimes there is something about being single, and not having a partner or having family, that makes that a little bit trickier.
Absolutely.
Because I don't want to burden my friends all the time.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that because I'm single, and my family has dwindled down to 2 nephews, one of whom lives in Switzerland, and I don't see him very often. So the one that lives in California, I go down and spend Christmas with him. But it's really more about being together. It's not about gifts and Santa Claus and all that stuff. It's just being with someone that I really value.
Yeah, absolutely, Don. Yeah.
And I would think that because you're from the UK, as much as our cultures are similar, it's not completely the same. I mean, even the slang isn't the same, and so so there's going to be things. Even if you're with somebody and you're in their home with their family, you're still going to feel like the odd person out, and there's still going to be a part of you that's lonely for what you remember about Christmas being in your home.
Absolutely, and that is, and it's interesting you should bring that up about culture, because I didn't think that when I moved here. I thought it was going to be really, really similar.
Mm-hmm.
I'd only ever been to Canada once before, or twice before, and the thing that struck me was how incredibly friendly everybody was and how welcoming and lovely they were. And I was in the mountains in Kimberley for a trip, and I had a really bad injury. I'd fractured my pelvis.
Oh my gosh.
But the people of the town were like, somebody drove up the mountain to give me these crutches that they had spare in their house.
Right.
And this was my first experience of Canadians, and I was like, wow, people are amazing. Like, so everyone's so helpful and lovely and friendly. And, so that was what I found so attractive about what I saw of the culture that I did see, which again was only a snapshot, but it was something I was like, I want to try this, and then obviously the longer I was here, the more I realised that it wasn't quite as straightforward as that, and and I guess I kind of knew that would be the case. I knew I'd have to get used to it. I knew that there would be differences that I would never have been able to have accounted for. I would just have to learn those as I spent more time here. But culturally, there are a lot of differences, and even just things like, I think talking about socializing with pubs. We obviously have a huge drinking culture in the UK, for better or worse. But a lot of people go to the pub after work for just like a quick drink, and you can always go, and you always know you're going to see people there, and it doesn't even really matter who you go with. You just can shout around the office, "Oh, anyone want a quick drink on the way home?" and somebody will be there to go with you, or you could go to the pub on your own and maybe chat with someone. But, because of even the way the bars are set up here, like, you can't just walk into a place, walk up to the bar, order a drink, and just stand around and just chat with people and mingle. Because here you literally have to go and sit down at a table and wait for someone to come and serve you, and then you have to stay at your table.
Right.
So you can't even get up and talk to people. And I just think that really inhibits social interaction in public spaces like that. I mean, I know there's lots of other places you can go and meet people. It's not just pubs and places that, you drink, but obviously that's a big part of it. And that was something that I feel real absence of, is because I think that then affects the way people interact with each other in general.
I'm really chatty. I chat with just about anybody over just about anything.
Yeah.
But there are times where people don't understand why you're talking to them at all. Like they just
Yep.
think that you're weird that you're talking to them, and so
Yeah.
that can be hard to overcome.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
had you been alone and not
Mhm,
going
right.
to someone's home for Christmas and family for Christmas, what kinds of things might you have done?
I probably would just have spent like a lot of time on Skype. I would have called my mum and probably chatted to my parents for a while, and then maybe my aunts and uncles, cousins, and my friends if they were free.
Mhm.
And then, I probably would just have used the day to have had like a day to myself, and maybe tried to sort of embrace that as like, let me just be okay with this loneliness. Let me be
Right.
okay with being by myself.
Right.
Because I don't think that, you have to be, but I think it can help if you can figure out a way to be. I mean, I'm very good at being alone, very good at being by myself. Like, I'm very independent. Obviously, I came and moved to a different country on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really mind. Do not mind being my own company at all. Sometimes I just want to be alone.
Right.
But there is something different about just being okay with being in that moment and sort of just sitting in that feeling, which can, even though I know I'm not the only one, it feels like I'm the only one when you're really in it.
You are the only one in it at that moment, right? That's
Exactly.
exactly
That's it.
what
Yeah.
loneliness is that you are the only one in it at that moment. So,
Yeah, totally.
well, I'm glad you found someone to hang out with on Christmas Day, Victoria.
you.
I hope it
Me
is a
too.
good Christmas day, and I hope you get to chat with your family over Skype. Thank God for Skype.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
changed.
that's the thing. Like, we're lucky that we live in an age where this technology is available. So
Yes.
that is one good thing.
It is one
Yeah.
of the good things. And I hope that if you need to, you can get back home and snuggle back into your culture where you feel like you belong on some level. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Victoria. And I hope
You're
you have a
welcome.
good holiday season.
Yeah, and you too.
Okay.
You too, and everyone listening.
Okay.
Goodbye.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I'm Bernadine Fox.
And I'm co-host Don Wright.
And we've been chatting about Christmas with folks, about how difficult it can be and some of the things that we can do to kind of offset the problems that can come up. And I thought that perhaps Don and I could just finish up today by talking a little bit more about what you can do. What are some of the things that we can do to make it easier to get through Christmas?
Well, I think one thing that is helpful is to try to really define the holiday on your own terms rather than some kind of socialized expectations. I mean, you don't have to try to replicate the TV commercials that are trying to get you to buy diamonds for everybody in your life.
That's true. That is true. One of the things that I've heard people do is that they just kind of figure out how to keep themselves from being actually exposed to Christmas holidays. So they keep the radio off if all that's on there is Christmas songs, and the TV off if all that's on there is Christmas shows. And gratefully now with the ability to have Netflix and Crave and Shaw on Demand and other forms of streaming, you're able to, in fact, actually spend a good many days without actually coming upon a Christmas thing. So you can binge watch series, you can binge watch all those movies that you didn't get to see throughout the year. What else, Don?
Well, we mentioned volunteering earlier on, and there are all kinds of opportunities to volunteer for soup kitchens or shelters or whatever.
I actually heard of one idea, which is to volunteer to work at animal shelters.
Yes.
Because dog walkers still need to come and walk the dogs or mind the cats, and you might not be able to do everything because I'm sure some of that is vetted, but you can certainly fill in ways that for other people. You can even maybe house sit and take care of somebody else's animals, and certainly animals are one of those things that help us keep our blood pressure down and keep calm and allow us to focus on other people and other things.
And I think where there are community-based events, whether it be street fair or something like that, might be an opportunity to have some kind of a social interaction. I'm not big on going out and buying expensive tickets to events and so on, but something like the sing-along Messiah is kind of interesting because you're actually in there singing with a room full of people, and I think that's a different kind of community experience than if you go to something like the ballet or whatever, where you're just simply silently watching.
Mm-hmm. And singing is a good thing to do to help yourself feel a little better. There's other things you can do as well, especially if your anxiety is getting the best of you, is you can do some things that are along the lines of mindfulness exercises. So art is one of those things that will help you focus down on something much smaller than the whole weight of Christmas. So adult coloring books, you could start painting, you could be drawing, you could also do cooking, and if you feel like it, you could do even Christmas cooking and be able to share that with some of the people that you meet in that time frame. I know people enjoy using cooking as a means of coping.
Right. I've also seen commercials lately about ordering dinner. Rather than having all the stress and anxiety of trying to prepare this big elaborate dinner, call one of the food services like Good Food or those things where you order in. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be turkey. It can be any kind of food that you decide that you'd like to have and to experience for that time.
Uber Eats and DoorDash and Grubhub, all of those things are great opportunities to have the food in that you want to have. The other thing you might do is think about the things about Christmas that you did like as a child, the things that brought you joy. And if, for instance, sledding is one of those things, then go get yourself a sled and find some snow and do that. If singing in a choir and doing caroling was one of those things, then find a way to do those things. People are always looking for folks to come and join them in those activities.
I think that's a good point. I mean, try to think about what really works for you and find a way to embrace and bring that into your holiday time, and leave out the things that you found overly stressful or ramped up the stress and anxiety in your family. If that's what happened, and leave that aside.
Mm-hmm. And if you do have to go home and be around the people who traumatized you, consider ways of building in, as Dawn said before, ways of finding a space to regroup, even if that's going to the bathroom for 5 minutes and just spending some time recentering and regrouping yourself. Put some safety plans in place and some excuses if you need them to get out of there, if you need to do it at a moment's notice. All of those things are okay. There is no reason why you have to participate in all of the things that have to do with a family Christmas if it's not safe for you to do that. So a few other things to remember. If you are somebody who takes medication on a regular basis, Christmas is one of those upsetting times that can have you forgetting to do that, and that can just add to the stress that you're dealing with. And so if you do take medication, try and remember to stay on top of that. And try also to remember that booze, as much as it can help you get through something, it can also depress your nervous system to such a degree that it can actually make you more depressed ultimately than is making you feel better. And don't forget to reach out to people. As Victoria said, there's a lot of people out there who are spending Christmas alone, and an orphan's Christmas is sometimes a very good thing to put together and find a way to enjoy the day. The next thing I want to chat about is New Year's, because as much as Christmas can be difficult for gobs of people, New Year's is an opportunity to start anew, and I would suggest people take that seriously and to consider their long and short-term goals for that New Year's. And I'm not talking about New Year's resolutions where you are going to get in shape or lose that weight or not eat chocolate or drink coffee. God knows why anybody would stop drinking coffee. But just think about your goals. What are your goals going to be? I have in the past spent New Year's Eve actually writing them down and sticking them into my calendar for the next New Year's Eve so I can go back and take a look at how many of those goals did I make, and do I want to reevaluate them, and are they a good goal or a bad goal? And often I have found that even though I set those goals and then never really thought about it again throughout the entire year, by the time the next New Year's Eve came around, I realized that I'd actually met each and one of those goals. So they're always a good thing to do. Anyway, we hope that all of you out there have an okay Christmas. You get through it well, whether it's the holiday season for people who celebrate Christmas or are celebrating Hanukkah or what's the other one?
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah. Yeah. And or any other religious holiday that happens to fall on this time frame of year. We hope you all have a great year. I'm Bernadine Fox, and that's our show. For those who cope with trauma and or mental health issues, Christmas can be a difficult time for a whole host of reasons. Jake and Victoria talked about 2 of them. On our resource page, we will be listing a number of resources for you if Christmas gets too difficult this year. They include a suicide crisis line, a mental health support line, a seniors distress line, a chat line for youth and adults, and a text line for youth. We will also post some information on coping with Christmas on the resource page. I do hope that your holiday season is as wonderful as it can be. My thanks to Jake and Victoria for coming to chat with us and to Don Wright for co-hosting, but most importantly, our thanks goes out to you for joining us today. I'm Bernadine Fox, and you've just listened to ReThreading Madness, the podcast that dares to change how we think about mental health. We air live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. or online at coopradio.org. If you have questions or feedback about this program or want to share your story or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, rethreadingmadness@coopradio.org. If you enjoyed this show, subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.
I've never been further from knowing what the hell I'm gonna do when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through. Just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright. Don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Yeah. Why don't I wonder how you know? Well, surely you don't have all of the facts. You could be just making it up. Why don't I ever think of that? It's some kind of magic in the words that you breathe, saying, baby, take it from me. It's alright, it's alright. Don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Everything's gonna be alright. With anyone else, it's such a cliche, just words people say to be nice. Or some